hosted by GMAT Club. We will have top schools joining us every single day to talk about their programs. We'll also host MBA admission experts weighing in on your profiles on the GMAT Club chat. And finally, we will have current students sharing their own MBA experiences. I wanted to introduce Eddie, Marissa, and Varun from Cornell Johnson. Why don't you take it away?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for being on this session today for our Cornell MBA GMAT Club chat regarding our program. And first of all, I just want to give a formal introduction. My name is Eddie Asbie. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admissions. I have been with Johnson for over 8 years, been in higher ed for the last approaching 16 years, but I do enjoy the work that I do here at Johnson. We have an amazing team, amazing community. So I'm really excited to have you all on this session to learn a little bit more about this program. Also, as I had mentioned, and as you had just saw, there are 2 current students who will be joining this session, where we will highlight a little bit further about, once again, our program as well as the student experience. All right, so to move forward, so the next slide, please. All right, so what I want to really focus on today is really the Cornell MBA offerings, and really getting the sense of which program makes sense for you and which one will truly add value to you personally and professionally. So I'm sure many of you are looking at probably more of a residential MBA program. We do have our 1-year MBA program as well as our 2-year MBA program, along with a variety of other programs, including our Cornell Tech MBA program and other executive programs, as you can see below. As you start really thinking about which program makes sense, I think that the research aspect of things is going to be very key. But within our 2-year MBA program here at Johnson, we have approximately about 280 students in our program versus our 1-year MBA program, where there's approximately 70 students in each program. We get asked the question all the time, which program makes sense? Typically in the 2-year program, you may see someone who is either earlier on in their career, someone who is looking for that internship opportunity, someone who's looking for 2 years of networking, and to really have that 2-year full immersive experience is something that you're going to get with the 2-year program. With the 1-year program, it is done at an accelerated pace. So of course, it begins in May and goes to the following May, but it is done at an accelerated pace. The one thing that you don't get with the 1-year program is that internship opportunity. But with the 1-year program, we typically see candidates who are doing dual degrees. We see candidates who may be more advanced within their career path and have established their own networks. Maybe they're going back to the family business and know that a 1-year MBA program is the best fit for them. So really continue to do your research, talk with our students, talk with our community to really figure out which program really makes sense for you. Next slide. So as we start thinking about Johnson, we get asked the question all the time, what sets Johnson apart? What makes us who we are? And one of the first things that pops into my mind is our Emergent Learning program. So when you think about an MBA, pretty standard, like any other program out there, that first semester, you are going through your core courses, but in the spring semester at Johnson, we have what we call our Emergent Learning program. And the immersion is, of course, designed to really immerse you into your specific career path, but ultimately to give you that hands-on learning experience. So through the immersion, there are a variety of different immersions. I believe there's about 8 immersions that we have, including a customized immersion where you can design the immersion the way you see best fit. But there are advanced level courses that you're taking. One of the things that I hear from our students all the time is through the immersion that you're working with professionals in the industry itself and ultimately getting feedback. And what the immersion is really designed to do is to prepare you for that summer internship so that you can hit the ground running. When I look at a lot of where our students are coming from, a lot of them are career switchers. So of course, being a career switcher, you are going to want some experience in advance of that internship. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of the various immersions that we have, as you can see, we have that strategic product and marketing immersion. There's a corporate finance immersion. There's an operations immersion, a sustainable global enterprise immersion. There's a digital technology immersion. There is an investment research and asset management immersion, investment banking, and then there's your management cases, primarily for those who are looking to make that transition really into consulting. But once again, with the immersion itself, it happens in that spring semester. So just say, for example, you choose digital technology, you're spending that full semester immersing yourself in digital technology courses or investment banking courses. Once again, doing company visits and really being able to have that experience underneath your belt so that you can hit the ground running. We do get a lot of feedback from companies, from our alums who may provide various projects for our students, and they do talk about how well prepared our students are. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to feel confident that Johnson's truly preparing you for the next step. And once again, that hands-on experience is going to be something that's very key as you really start thinking about your transition, whether it's staying in the same industry or whether it is making that career switch. Next slide. So also when I think about things that make Johnson very unique, I do think about our Cornell Tech MBA program. So we do, as I had mentioned, there is a one-year MBA program in New York City. It's our Cornell Tech program. This Cornell Tech program is really designed for candidates who are looking to bridge that gap between digital technology and the business environment as well, and bridging the gap between these two. With this one-year MBA program, our Cornell Tech students actually start in Ithaca with our one-year residential students going through the core, but then once the fall and the spring semester begins, they will then transition to New York City. But for our residential MBA students located here in Ithaca, we give them the best of both worlds. We give them the opportunity to not only spend their time in Ithaca and the majority of their courses in Ithaca, but also being able to take advantage of Cornell Tech, especially if they're looking to go in the tech sector. So what we do offer are two offerings for our residential MBA students. We have our New York City elective courses, which are weekend elective courses during the fall semester that are offered to our students. Courses, of course, are offered on Fridays and Saturdays, and students are allowed to take up to 2 classes within that weekend. But you will see a variety of elective courses that are offered, whether it's based off of on cryptocurrency, whether it's design thinking, whether it's more on just the fintech side of things. But this is a great opportunity for you to be able to go back and forth between both campuses. But then also we have 2 intensives that happen in the spring semester of your second year, or if you're in the one-year program, that spring semester right before you graduate. There's a fintech intensive, but then also there's a digital marketing intensive. Both intensives are 7-week courses where you actually physically live on the Cornell Tech campus. After those 7 weeks, you have that opportunity of either continuing to take elective courses on the Cornell Tech campus or returning back to the Ithaca campus to finish out your final weeks in the program. But once again, these are various opportunities for you to really be able to explore not only the Ithaca campus, but then also the Cornell Tech campus. All right, next slide. All right, so what I want to do is, as I had mentioned, I also want the session to really be about the student experience. itself. And I do have Varun on the call, who's going to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his experience at Johnson. So Varun, if you wouldn't mind just taking it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Eddie. And hello to everyone online. As Eddie mentioned, my name is Varun. I'm an MBA in the class of 2021. Just a little bit about myself. I want to jump through this quickly so we have more time for questions. I'm from Newton, Massachusetts originally, and I went to Davidson College down in North Carolina for my undergrad. I was actually a history and Spanish major down there, so shout out to anyone who has a non-traditional background. You can have an MBA, you can get an MBA as well. But I spent the last 6 or so years in the tech sector, and most notably in implementation and systems integration. The last company that I worked for was a company called HubSpot in Boston, which is kind of similar to a Salesforce, if you're familiar with that software. Coming to business school, I realized, I really wanted to go to school just because when I was working at HubSpot, I realized that my skills sort of lent itself to working at a work stream level. And as a result, I didn't really have an idea of the big picture of like the why as to why I was doing my work. Essentially, I didn't have those hard accounting and finance and strategy skills to be able to see that big picture. So coming in, that's what I wanted. And as a result, I wanted to gain as much strategy experience as I possibly could and explore careers into straight strategy consulting. As far as Johnson, as Eddie mentioned, our community is really tight-knit. I really felt like the connections I made here were meaningful. I remember on my interviews, I went in, and you always have a great time at the schools you go to, but the folks at Johnson actually followed up with me after I left campus. So it made me seem like those connections really were more genuine than a lot of other places I had gone to. And as for clubs that I'm involved with, probably the largest time suck out of here is my involvement as student council co-president. You'll meet my fellow co-president Marisa in a second. I'm also part of Big Red Consulting, which is essentially our campus consulting firm. So it gives us a chance, as Eddie mentioned, to do some experiential learning. I'm also part of our consulting club and Community Impact, which is our community service organization. And last but not least, I work with admissions, either as fielding chats or working with prospective students. And last but not least, just to give you a bit more flavor about myself, since I went to Davidson, if you guys are not familiar with the small school, our most notable alum is NBA basketball player Stephen Curry. So I've actually, as a fun fact, I've actually sung karaoke multiple times actually with Steph. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much for that. And we definitely had to chat about your karaoke with Steph Curry.
More than happy.
So I want to pass this off to Marisa. Marisa, it's good to have you on as well, and just want you to introduce yourself to our audience as well. But thank you for being on.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Eddie, and thank you, Varun. So as Varun mentioned, I am his co-chair for Student Council. I am a JD MBA here at Cornell as part of the class of 2022. I'm originally from Morristown, New Jersey. For undergraduate, I attended Dartmouth College, and similar to Varun, also majored in liberal arts. So it is useful and you can leverage that in business. Prior to the MBA, I worked as a legal assistant at Sullivan & Cromwell in New York City. So originally I intended, what really drew me to the MBA was when I was at the law firm, I noticed that having a strong understanding of business skill set, especially when you're at a corporate law firm, would be hugely beneficial and allow you to rise the ranks in a law firm quite quickly. So originally I was planning on using the MBA as leverage in the legal field, but upon being at Johnson and spending more time here, I'm actually more interested in leveraging my JD on the business side. And so I'm using this time here to kind of pivot actually into the business sector. With that, some of my involvement in Johnson, as Varun mentioned, we are on student council, and that definitely sucks up most of our time. I'm also the vice president of the JD MBA Society. I'm involved in consulting club, high tech club, and entrepreneurship club. Similar to Varun, it really resonated with me with, being a part of Johnson is the sense of community is very strong. And something that's really cool, particularly about Cornell, is we have access to one of the most premier graduate schools in the country. So, when you're here as an MBA student, you can definitely take advantage of that and have different communities, not only in Johnson, but across all the graduate school campus, which is, I think, what makes Cornell especially unique and appealing. And my fun fact, although not as cool as Varun's, is I am the oldest of 6 children.
Right. Marisa, thank you so much. And it is just as cool.
As you can have your own karaoke contest.
Yeah.
That's true.
So one of the things I want you to, for our audience to keep in mind, just by listening to Varun and to Marisa as well, hearing about their different background experiences, coming from, the legal side of things. And when you look at, where the makeup of our class is, we have candidates who are not just only in the financial sector, consulting, the legal side, we have engineers, we have doctors, we have athletes, we have military, you name it, businesses in so many different areas. So, keep in mind that when thinking about applying to business school, it is really more about why an MBA and how the MBA is going to help you transition. But, once again, we're here to help you out and help you address if this step makes sense to you. So, once again, Marisa and Varun, thank you so much. And they will be on with us for the rest of the time. But I do want to transition just into a little bit about leadership. We know that a lot of you are looking to get great jobs, but also you're looking to be a leader within the work that you're doing. And I truly believe that Johnson is a outstanding institution that helps our students to be able to grow in this space. So I just want Varun and Marisa to just talk about leadership at Johnson. Of course, being co-presidents of Student Council, I know that's a lot right there, but can you speak about some of the various ways that you are involved or Johnson helps you develop as a leader?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, kind of before we get started there, I just want to piggyback on what Eddie just said. Like, you're going to come and get your MBA and you're going to learn some hard skills, and ultimately, like, you want to land that great first job. But ultimately, we want to be the leaders of tomorrow, and in order to do that, we need to have the infrastructure in place to make that tangible impact. And I can unequivocally say that Johnson has tons and tons of programs in order to fortify that skill set. We'll talk about student council in a second, because Marisa, I feel like we can probably chime in on that together. But at least in terms of some of the offerings we have, as you can see here, the first one that we can see is sort of Johnson Joe, or Johnson Outdoor Experience. It's during orientation, where you come together, meeting your classmates through various challenges. Involves you speaking up, communicating, all those classic soft skills and leadership qualities that it would take to to succeed on a team. We also incorporate leadership very dynamically into our core teams, and as well as like certain treks. Like, I know that there are some leadership treks to the Adirondacks, and we even have a Patagonia trek in wintertime that really do test your leadership, because you're out in the wilderness for 6 days. In addition to that, we have some fellow programs. We have our Johnson Board Fellows, where you can serve as a board for a local community. Our Leadership Fellows, where you can advise those first-year core teams. And as many of you know, we have our Park Leadership Fellow program, which is essentially, doing a community service project. It's obviously a full tuition scholarship, but those are sort of the folks on campus who we look to take leads on various initiatives. Marisa, is there anything that I missed on the slide that you want to chime in on?
Oh, I thought it was a very good overview. I just wanted to add one quick thing to both your and Eddie's points. Eddie, you had mentioned that we have a lot of people coming from diverse backgrounds and who have had different work experiences. And I think that's what makes Cornell Johnson so unique, in that people are coming from all over the place, and that the leadership program really tailors to working with different people, so that when you get out in the workforce, not only how to lead those people, but also how to learn from each other, which I think is also an integral skill that Johnson is really good at equipping us with.
But yeah, I mean, just like really quickly on the student council note, because I know we're up for time. I mean, not personally, I think for both me and Marisa, I can speak to say that we have been thrust into so many leadership conversations over the last year, given that this year is so dynamic with COVID-19, with all the systemic unrest in this country, we've been forced out of our comfort zones to be able to have those tough conversations here. So that way we don't feel as uncomfortable having them in the workplace, and are able to better navigate those conversations and, perhaps, some of our colleagues.
Great, thank you. And once again, thank you for, the work that you do. Once again, these are just two leaders here at Johnson, but I would encourage you to reach out to other members of our community here at Johnson. There's over 70 different clubs and organizations on campus. And if there's anything that you need, or you want to be in touch with someone in particular, feel free to reach out. But one of the last slides that I have, that we have at this time, is just to really talk about Ithaca. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Ithaca, Ithaca is located in central New York. We are about 4 hours north of New York City. We're about an hour south of Syracuse, New York. But it is an amazing, amazing college town. Being the largest of the Ivy Leagues out there, some of the things that you're going to get, even being on campus, there's waterfalls and gorges on campus. We're right in the Finger Lakes region within New York State. If you enjoy being on the lake, that's what Ithaca, is about. But also it's about the community. Ithaca, one of the things that I love about Ithaca is that Ithaca truly supports the community, but also supports locally owned businesses as well. And that's something that you're really going to see. So I think that as you start really thinking about, location, what you're ultimately getting out of the location itself, know that this is an amazing place where people truly care about each other. I always believe that our community is very invested in each other. And I think that's one of the benefits of being in Ithaca, but then also having a smaller program as well, is that you really get the opportunity to know each other and to really be able to help push each other to do better. As I had mentioned, I've been here for 8 years. It's been the best 8 years of my life. As well, but anything else to add about Ithaca, your experience being here?
I think it's basically to your point. It's a calculated decision to be in Ithaca. That's for sure. But I will say that I don't regret it for a second. It's clean, the food's good. You get to know your classmates, great trails. Honestly, some people think the distance to major cities is a problem, but I personally think it's a great bonding experience to basically get all your classmates in a car and just kind of get down to New York for an interview, or if you're running around together and everyone has the same schedule. So I love it.
To echo Varun's point, I feel the same way. I was actually particularly drawn to the remote location. Being and working in New York for 2 years after college, I knew that I wanted to be, not in a place that had a city as a distraction. So I felt like people weren't fully immersed in not only academics, but also the extracurriculars. And here at Johnson, we are the main priority. So everyone is super involved and is always really keen on including everyone in the community on outdoor activities, or trying the new wineries or going to new restaurants. So it definitely is a lot of fun.
All right, well, thank you. So I know that so that's the presentation that we have. I know that we're gonna probably spend the next 20 minutes or so answering questions. Myself, along with Marisa and Varun, are here to answer your questions. Also, my colleague, Jade Kinsman, has been on the chat, also answering some questions. So if we don't get to your questions, please put them in the chat feature, but then also feel free to reach out to us as well. So I appreciate that comment right there. I appreciate it. Thank you. So we would like to, open it up to questions.
All right, Cornell is known for finance. How does the career cell helps students go into consulting, and how many people get into MBP? All right. So I think I'll take this question because I recruit for consulting. Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if our reputation for finance did not precede us. Historically, Cornell has been pretty strong in iBanking. However, we actually have a new associate dean. His name is Drew Pascarella. He came on last year, and he's passed in some really great initiatives to keep our iBanking program strong, but also fortify our pillars in tech and in consulting as well. But in terms of consulting resources that you have on campus, ultimately, ultimately, like you have your consulting club, which you go to every week, which will help you with your stories and casing. To be quite honest, I didn't realize how involved my second year classmates would be in this whole process. I think that really surprised me. They took out the time, they took out the time to essentially case with me, help me, with mock interviews. We also have things called career work group leaders, which I'm actually going to be doing next year too. And it's basically a pair of 2 second years pairing up with about 5 or 6 first years to help them with their internships. So we have those small group settings to help ask any of those dumb questions or understand the formats of how things go. I mean, in terms of the actual recruiting, numbers vary from year to year. And I think rather than the numbers, because our internship class is still sort of evening out, looking at percentages, but overall we've been pretty strong. Out of the 3, I can say that McKinsey, is the one that hires most Johnson grads. Reese, is there anything that I missed on that?
Yeah, just something to add with regard to how specifically the Career Center helps is that they actually bring all the companies here to campus. So most of the big consulting firms actually come to Johnson. We don't have to travel to them, which is really nice. So it makes, we are not at a disadvantage for not being in New York City. So I just wanted to underscore that a ton of companies do come here and you don't have to be traveling all the time.
Is it possible for a Tech MBA student to take a part-time internship during the semester, since students in the one-year program may not have a chance to take a spring or summer internship?
So regarding that, and that's a really good question, and I'm not really sure off the top. So with our program in particular, our admissions team oversees the 1 year and the 2-year residential program in Ithaca. There is another admissions team that oversees Cornell Tech's program. I know that with Cornell Tech, though, there are various projects that they are working on between both the fall and the spring semester as well. I know that with the work that they do, it's very intense. So being able to take a part-time internship, I'm sure that's going to be tough. But what I would actually encourage you to do is to either follow up with me directly with an email, and I can definitely reach out to Cornell Tech about what internship opportunities may look like. But once again, being that it's a full-time residential program and the various projects, I think that it will be challenging for students to be able to take advantage of.
Eddie, I'm not sure, just to add off that question, and maybe a middle ground would be to look into potentially pursuing it as independent study. Maybe it's not the full part-time internship, but you're able to get academic credit for it and do research for a certain professor, just so you can build up some kind of, professional experience, if that's what the drive is for looking into that part-time internship.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, does Cornell's MBA accept students with around 10 years of experience? And yes, we do. So one thing that you want to keep in mind, especially if you look at our profile online, you're probably going to see about an average of about 5 years of experience. But once again, that's the average. So when you really look at what the range is of years of experience, it's going to vary. And yes, there are people with our students with 10 years of experience in the program. One of the things that I would encourage you to truly take into consideration and to really be aware of is, why is this the right time for you to get an MBA? And this is why, and this is a part of the application process where I feel that some candidates are very successful, but then also some candidates may struggle in this part. If you have 10 years of experience in, the reason why you're getting an MBA now is because you just had great opportunities throughout your career with career progression, or maybe, maybe you started a family within that time and you were really focusing on your family. Like, you really want to be able to articulate that. But yes, with 10 years of experience, that's fine. But I will say though, if you have extensive years of experience, so I've seen candidates with 20 years of experience, over 20 years of experience applying to a 2-year residential program. You really want to evaluate if an executive program makes sense. And once again, if this is a conversation that you are interested in having, feel free to reach out to myself or any member of the team. So does Cornell's Career Center help with recruiting for marketing and brand management?
So, I mean, I think the short answer here is yes, it does. But essentially similar to the resources that you would use for consulting, I mean, you're going to have a career work group for that. You're going to have second years who have gone to the, gone to those respective firms that you're interested in. As Marisa mentioned, these places all come to campus, so you'll have a chance to see them face to face and meet in person. We also have, for me personally, I was in the strategic product and marketing immersion, which was incredibly helpful in terms of market research. And I know even though I'm working at a consulting firm this summer, just some of the factor and cluster analyses that we're required to do, I would not have learned had I not been in that, in that immersion. So those are at least some of the hard skills. We do have a marketing advisor, within the CMC. Marisa, anything else in terms of resources?
I was just going to add, there's a Battle of the Brands competition in the beginning of the year where a bunch of marketing companies come on campus, or you act as a marketing consultant for a bunch of companies that come on campus, and it's a battle amongst, I think 4 or 5 different brands. And so you all make your presentations in the atrium, you're testing out your products and everything with the students. So it's a very fun way for the community to get engaged with the marketing community, but also for you as students to showcase your skill set to potential employers.
So what are the traits that you're looking for in an applicant, and how do you assess these traits from the application, resume, essay, and interviews? Great question. So traits that I'm looking for in an applicant, I think one is, I think it's a given, with an MBA, especially with the quantitative side of things. With any of our candidates, we want to make sure that you can truly handle the rigor of the core. There are various ways throughout the application that you can truly demonstrate, your preparation and ultimately how serious you are about this process. But as far as specific traits, I always say I am looking for someone who's selfless. And I think this is a great representation of who we are as a Johnson community. And when I say selfless, our students are, business school can be competitive, but at Johnson, it's not cutthroat. You're going to have your classmates who they're going to push you to be better. They are going to, if you're applying for the same job, you're prepping together. Once you're done with that interview, you're going to go back to your classmates and tell them the questions that you, were asked, how you answered it, how you wish you had answered it. And that's just the type of person that we're looking for. I also kind of throughout the application process, we want someone who is going to be able to show their leadership or their leadership potential as well. And you can see that by the examples that someone puts in their essays, by the examples that they may talk about in their interview as well. I think that's something else. But also when you get to your interview, you really have a good sense of really who really wants to be here. You can see who has done their due diligence and who's ultimately, have a really good sense of our community. and how their experiences, how their traits would add value within our community. But being genuine and authentic is something that you can clearly see in an application, and also in an interview. And I always say that in the interview in particular, that's your opportunity. That's your opportunity to shine. Some people are just not great writers, or maybe they just don't convey themselves in writing, the best. But when you get to that interview, that's your opportunity to tell your story, why you're a good fit for Johnson. Talk about, your leadership. Talk about specific things that we're doing here at Johnson, where you see yourself being a contributing member of our community. So those are some of the things that I look for, and I know that my committee looks for. But then once again, that genuine side of things is something that's going to be very key. Like I said, if you haven't, and this is why I stress it so much, if you haven't connected with members of our community to get a good sense of why you're a good fit, please connect with members of our community. All right, yeah, next question. How does Johnson look at reapplicants? We love reapplicants, all right? And the one thing about a reapplicant, and we talk about this all the time in our committee, is it shows that you're dedicated, that you're committed to the program. All right, and committed to Johnson. So, once again, as a reapplicant, if this is where you feel that this is where you should be, I would encourage you to reapply. Now, what I would say about a reapplicant, though, we want you to be self-aware just throughout the whole application process. We want you to be self-aware of what your strengths are and what are maybe areas of improvement. So, as a reapplicant, go back and thoroughly look at your application and identify areas of improvement. So was it the GMAT or the GRE? Is it that you have gaps in your work experience? Is it that you put that you want to go to another business school in our Cornell essay? These are things that we say, that we see in an application itself, but also highlight. In our reapplicant essay, we do ask you how you've strengthened your application since you've last applied. So you want to be able to answer those questions thoroughly, but then also to make sure that you've really given this thought. Has Johnson allowed upcoming students to defer, and how has that affected the next class size? So great question. So for this upcoming year, so typically with our policy, we do not grant deferrals unless it's extreme circumstances. So we do ask our students to put a deferral request in writing, explaining why. Right now, we're still in the process of identifying what our fall semester will look like, whether it's virtual, whether it is on campus, but then also following what may happen with the administration here in the U.S. as well. That could affect some students, especially international students, where we could potentially defer. But as of right now, those deferrals we're still waiting on making a final decision. But once again, typically we don't grant deferrals. All right. Is the Emergent Learning a mini internship? Can you elaborate more on the example of projects taken by students?
Yeah, I guess we can just talk about our projects. So I think the short answer for mini internship, I've personally only been in my internship for about a week and a half now. Maybe Marisa can answer that part better, but at least to me, I mean, you are solving a business problem. Like for us, for strategic product and marketing, it was awesome. I got to work with, actually, we got to do a lot of market research for Under Armour and their and basically looking at the college-age population and seeing, what kind of influencers drove business, and as a result, like what their next targeting strategy or strategy tactics should be. So in a way, like it was like taking a business problem, synthesizing the information, like running surveys and focus groups, collecting data and like creating a client-ready deck and presenting your findings, which is probably something that's very similar to what folks are going to be doing in their internships. But I guess I'll pass it on to Marisa to talk about her project and if that is actually what's happening.
Definitely. Thanks, Varun. So it can be viewed as sort of a mini internship, but I would say it's more of a touch point for you to have with companies and maybe the field that you're interested in pursuing. It depends on the project that you've been assigned with regard to the time and the workload. This past year, I was in the digital technology immersion. So our project was to create a prototype for a device that used AR technology in the home, which is really, really interesting. Unfortunately, we didn't have the chance to actually go to the facility. That was part of the program. But usually you have some points of interaction, virtually and also physically with your client. The way DTI worked is that we had a weekly meeting with the client where we present our findings each week, similar to what Varun's experience was. So the projects vary amongst the immersion that you select, and also within the immersion, there's also diversity of project offerings too. And you have autonomy in selecting which immersion you would like to opt into, and also, for the most part, which project you'd also like to contribute to.
Application essay about, ooh.
Yeah. So the question is, what are your application essay about? So for this year, for this past application cycle, we had a few different essays. So our first essay was your goal statement. So it's pretty much more of a fill in the blank, but then also we give you an opportunity to elaborate a little bit further, but it's what is your short-term, what is your long-term goal, fill in the blank. And then once again, write a brief paragraph if needed. The other essay was an impact essay. So the impact essay really focuses on, based off of, life's experiences and, things that you may be currently doing in your career, ways that you see yourself making an impact within the Johnson community. And I think this is where it's really important, where you really do your research, and when we advise you to, connect with our students, connect with our members of our community to be able to answer this essay question. So, if it is you're interested in marketing, what is it about marketing, that you see yourself, doing here at Johnson, or, is it a club organization where you see yourself being a leader in the specific club organization? But once again, impact at Johnson is very important. So, really identify ways of making that impact. But then also there's a back of the resume essay. The back of the resume essay, if you think about the front of your resume, most likely is going to talk about your work experience, talk about accomplishments, achievements. But if you look at the back of your resume, it's probably going to tell us a different story about who you are. Maybe it's something about your family life. Maybe it is something about volunteer experiences that you've been a part of. Something that you really want us to know about who you are is what that back of the resume essay really focuses on. And then the last essay is an optional essay. So of course, the optional essay, if there's any red flags in your application that you want to address, whether it's gaps in your work experience, whether it is grades drop 1 year to the next year, whether it is reasons why you're not using your current supervisor as a recommender. Once again, this is what the optional essay is for. But once again, this is the essays from last year. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks or so, we will be announcing what our application deadlines are, as well as the essays for the upcoming application cycle. So kind of sit tight to hear what that announcement may be. But thanks for asking. So I know that we probably have about maybe 1 more minute, but what I want to do is just say, ask Varun and Marisa if there's one more piece of advice that you have for our audience members, what would that be?
Sure. I guess I'll start off. So I think I guess I'll compact two things into one. So number one, when you're going to business school and you're picking where you want to go, I can't emphasize how important fit is. You know, we tend to fuss about rankings and things like that here and there, but honestly, go with your gut as to where you feel most comfortable, because that's the way you can access all possible resources. And at least from a Cornell standpoint, we have way more resources than I could have even imagined.
Definitely. Mine was actually going to be something very, very similar, but I think just emphasizing Eddie's point, reach out to current students. And I know right now it's a little bit difficult, but for me, one of the biggest factors in swaying me to come to Cornell was being able to sit in on a class and say, okay, can I see myself here? And envisioning yourself, whether it's in the atrium or in a classroom there, that experience was really integral to me. And I think you can also decipher that from conversations you have with other students as well. So definitely say reaching out and learning more about personal experiences and personal reasons as to why people chose Johnson.
Right, and thank you. My last piece of advice that I would say is have fun throughout this process. I think this is an opportunity for you to really explore, to learn more about yourself, why this makes sense, but then also getting to know our communities. I know taking the GMAT GRE is not fun, but there are other components of your application, and just getting to know schools, in Johnson in particular. It's something that's worthwhile. So have fun as you go through this process. But ultimately, I just want to say thank you all for being on this session. I hope that this was very helpful for you. Please feel free to reach out to myself, to Varun, to Marisa, to get to know us a little bit more. But I do wish you all the best, and enjoy your day. So take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.